Hey friends, what's going on? Tony with Florida Barbecue Guys here. Today we're going to show you a really cool treat. It's a take on a Cuban pastry that we have all over the place down here in Florida. It's Pastelitos de Guayaba y Queso. So it's basically a cheese and guava pastry. Now the difference is, usually when you find this, it's going to be a puff pastry. They cook it in puff pastry, sometimes with cream cheese, but always with guava paste. Guava paste is something that you can find in just about any grocery store down here in Florida. The big box grocery stores have it, and certainly the small Spanish grocers have it too. We're going to be using Swiss cheese, and this is going to be different than the regular cream cheese, and then of course the Cuban bread. Now, a cool thing about Cuban bread before we get to cooking is a little bit of history. If you grew up in Florida, and if you grew up particularly in Tampa or Miami, this was all over the place. You just called it bread. It's just what was there. But in the original way, in the old-timey bakeries, it was a little bit different. So it's very similar to French bread. It's long, kind of a crusty outside, a very soft middle. But they cook Cuban bread with a little bit of fat in it, a little bit of lard. This is different than the French. Also, they would take palm fronds and they would put them in the bread to get this striping, to get that crease in there. And it typically bakes out, but sometimes when you were a kid and you'd get the bread and it would come in these big long paper bags, you'd be able to pull off that palm frond, and it was always kind of a treat because we're kids and we're weird and that's what we like to do. Now, there is some debate on where Cuban bread comes from. Does it come from Tampa or does it come from Miami? Well, that might go on forever, just as where does, who has the best Cuban sandwich? It's Tampa. But the very first bakery to produce Cuban bread as we know it was in fact in Tampa in 1896. And a cool thing too is it would be delivered often with your daily milk. And people would drive these giant nails outside of their doorpost, and the delivery man would just take the bread and just smack it right on that nail. And so you'd come out in the morning and you'd get your milk and you'd get your bread. Cuban bread does not last very long, maybe a day or so, because it's so fresh. It just goes stale after that. Now you can eat it after that. You can certainly use it again if you bake it and soften it back up, but it is a very fresh bread and it's meant to be eaten usually the same day. So with that, there's your history lesson for the day. Let's go ahead and begin making our pastries. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're actually going to trim our bread. We could use this whole loaf. Typically, if you go to a Cuban bakery, the loaf is going to be a little bit closer to 3 feet long. We're actually going to do something a little bit special with the other part. So we're going to take this small, we're just going to set it aside, and we're going to use this larger portion. Now for our pastries, just to keep things a little bit even, we're going to cut off this end, but definitely save that. It is good eats and it is yum. Then we're going to take our Cuban bread. We're just going to slice down the middle. Okay, so we can get it into 2 halves. It helps to have a very sharp knife. So you can see inside, if you're unfamiliar with Cuban bread, it's really soft inside. A little bit of a harder outside exterior, but it's very, very soft inside. It's quite delicious on your own just to have like this. But now we're going to take our bread, or our cheese rather, our Swiss cheese. This is just cheese from the cheese section of the grocery store. We're going to lay it out. Okay, so now we have our cheese. Next, we want to take our guava paste. So we're going to go ahead and get this cut open, and then I'll show you how to put it on. So for our guava paste, I did mention that you can find this all over. Certainly most grocery stores down in Florida, but probably in the Southeast as well. Take a look in your international aisle at your big grocery stores. In your Spanish or other ethnic grocery stores, you might be able to find it as well. This is Conchita brand. There's nothing really special about this brand other than just the one I grabbed. Usually between $1 to $3 for something this size. It smells really fruity and aromatic when you open it. It can sit out. It does not have to be refrigerated. So just put it in your pantry when you're ready to use it. Now after you open it, maybe throw it in a zip top bag and put it in the refrigerator just to make it last longer. But certainly before you open it, there's no need to do that. So we're gonna go ahead and begin spreading this on. So you see as I open it, it has a dark caramel color, but almost like a brick red color. And again, very fruity. It actually smells a little bit like a fruit roll-up when you first get into it. But it's not sickeningly sweet, and that's why it's gonna go so well here with our Swiss cheese. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut some slices, and then we will start putting it on. Nothing special, I'm just using the same bread knife here. It's really soft, you can see it. I like to cut the slices thick because I like the taste of it, and so I want to have a little more in there. And as you warm it, as you cook it, it's going to soften and spread out. So here's how it's going to look. We're going to put it right down the middle. So you want to lay it right down the middle. It's going to soften and spread out a little bit. And if you have too much on the end, just lob it off. All right, keep it simple. So we're going to go ahead and lay out our other pieces as well on our second half of the loaf. And again, it's too long, just lob it off. Save that, give it to the kids, or eat it yourself. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to get the griddle warm. And we're also going to do a little trick here that we often do with Cuban sandwiches, is we're going to take a cast iron skillet and we're going to use it, we're going to warm it up, and we're going to use it to press the bread. So it's going to warm it from both sides. So we're going to go ahead and get that going. When we come back, we'll be cooking. All right, so we've got the griddle all warmed up. I've got my trusty thermometer here, and it tells me that we are sitting at about 370. We've also have our cast iron sitting on the griddle. It's warming up, and it's sitting about 250 or so. That's fine. So first thing we want to do, and this is completely optional, if you wanted to do another method, you could use aluminum foil or another fat of your choice. We're just going to take a little bit of butter and throw it down. Again, the method here is something like a cheese toast. So we just kind of want to spread it around. Think about where your bread is going to be. You can see it's not hissing and spitting a terrible lot. We want this temperature a little bit low because we're toasting. So we're going to let this get out. It's starting to get a little bit golden brown. That is perfect. So just spread that butter around. And then we're going to leave our cast iron right there for now. We're going to take our bread, right? We've put it together, and we're going to set it down a little bit, get that one side buttered. Then we're just going to flip it. So now we have both sides are buttered. We're simply going to take our cast iron now, and we're going to set it right on top. And it's going to press down all of that goodness. So it's going to make the sandwich a little more flat, but it's going to work on cooking that cheese, and it's going to work on melting that guava paste. And it's going to be cooking against the butter. It's going to give it a little bit of a richness. Again, you don't have to use the butter. I like the butter. All right, so we've been cooking about another 3 or 4 minutes. I have been periodically checking it just to make sure that we don't burn anything. Like I said, at this point, you just have to keep an eye on it. The Cuban bread is tough, but you just don't want to let it go too long. So I'm going to flip over just to show you. We got a nice golden color on this side. So now we're going to go ahead and take it off, and then we'll slice it up and show you what's going on inside. Okay, so we are done cooking our Pastelitos de Guayaba y Queso. So this is our Cuban pastry. It has cooled for just a minute or two, and now we want to go ahead and slice it. So get you a bread knife, something with some serrations, and just start cutting. You can hear that crisp. We're just going to cut on the bias here because I think it looks so pretty. These are a little bit rich, so you don't need great big pieces. You've got that yummy guava paste inside. You have that butter on the outside. You've got the little bit of a tang and a bite from the Swiss cheese. And then you do have that natural goodness of the Cuban bread. So we've got this all sliced up. So we're going to take a piece right out of the middle here. You can see that guava paste is right inside, and it's just oozing out. You can see it coming out of both sides, and that's that yummy part you want to get to. So you get that first bite with the cheese, and then the middle is the guava, and then you have that last little bit is the cheese. So you get that oozy goodness coming right out, and if it falls out, you just dip it right in. You just get it right on there. Now I will tell you this, the guava paste gets really, really hot. Okay, so you don't want to eat it straight away. You just want to let it cool a couple minutes so that it doesn't burn your tongue, especially if you're going to give it to the kids or you're going to serve it to guests. You don't want to burn in the roof of their mouth, because then that's not just being a good host. So we hope you enjoyed this recipe. We hope you enjoyed watching us cook it. We're certainly going to enjoy eating it. Let us know if you try it. Remember too what I said, you also have the option when you make this, you do not have to use butter, and you can spread out the guava paste instead of letting it run down the middle. This is just the way we like to eat it. So we hope you enjoyed it. It's Florida Barbecue, guys. Have a good one.